I'm Frank Garza, and welcome to Here and Abroad, a podcast that follows the U.S. men's national team and their player pool across Europe, MLS, or wherever else they play their club football. On today's show, we're going to preview the USMNT's upcoming friendlies against Paraguay this Saturday, November 15th, and against Uruguay on the following Tuesday. To help me do that, I've invited Chuck Booth to join the show. Chuck is a soccer writer at CBS Sports. So, Chuck, let's start with the roster that Mauricio Pochettino announced last week. I believe when it came out, it was 25 players. Now we're down to 24 players. But what stood out the most to you from this list of players that he's chosen?
I think number one is the Giorena's on it. And I think it's interesting because considering his actual playing time for Gladbach, it is a bit of a surprise for him to be on this roster. But I think Pochettino is realizing that this is one of the last chances that he'll get to look at some of these players before really needing to hone in on his World Cup roster. Like, this does kind of feel like the last shot roster for a lot of players.
Yeah, you could say that about Chio's buddy, Joe Scally, who also got called back in. But I do think, Gio Reyna's inclusion was probably the biggest talking point for me. I mean, do you agree with his decision? Are you glad he brought him in? Because I personally was disappointed.
Yeah. So here's the thing. You don't have Christian Pulisic. You don't have Malik Tillman. Diego Luna still hasn't shown that he can actually take this step forward against top opposition. Like, Diego Luna's had great games for the USMNT, but when he's played against top 25 opposition, which is what they'll do facing Uruguay later in this camp, he hasn't performed in those moments. And so when you just look at who is actually available in those attacking midfielders, it's pretty thin. So just the fact that Reyna is healthy and available, this camp just kind of lined up for him to get a shot, because I really don't know who else you call for that role.
It's true. And that is a good point. I mean, I was disappointed because Poch has just been preaching this message about you have to earn your spot, for so long. And it seemed to be working. If you look at the last couple of windows, the team was playing better. The intensity on the field was better. There seemed to be more competition. He had developed more competition in some of these positions. And so to me, I thought he contradicted himself, and I'm like, man, what you're doing seems to be working. You're making these guys like work for it. And then you just invite this guy in who you keep talking about how he's a special player, and I don't know. It's like they were giving him something that they wouldn't give other players, and so that disappointed me. But to your point, I get that if I ask myself who would I have brought in instead, I struggle to come up with somebody.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, none of this says that Gio Reyna will start or even see the field. But I think when you have to make a roster of this many people, like, I just don't know who you bring in for that spot. And I mean, I guess this is probably a chance to talk about probably the biggest exclusion of this squad in Weston McKennie, who Pochettino said is down to the coaching change at Juventus, but it feels like it's more than just a coaching change for Juventus.
Oh, you tell me more about that, because I didn't get that feeling. Tell me more about that.
I just feel like especially in the past year and a half, 2 years, you don't know what Weston McKennie you're going to get when he steps out on the pitch. And even the fact that, like, Pochettino's been trying him in different roles, with him playing as an attacking midfielder more than he's been in a double pivot. I don't know if Pochettino's necessarily happy with what he's seen. Like, it was just very convenient considering he's, a long tenured USMNT player. And whenever they're not in the roster, it's always going to be a discussion. But this seemed like just all too convenient of a time for him to be left in Italy versus coming to the national team.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I definitely thought there was, an issue with that Pochettino maybe had with McKennie, before the last camp because he had been left off of several. But then he came into the last camp, and I thought he played really well. He seemed to have a good attitude. Everyone was talking about how fit, he looked. So I would have thought he made a good impression there. But who knows? You don't really know why Mauricio Pochettino was making a lot of these decisions because a lot of what he says in the press conferences just doesn't make any sense, or it changes from one press conference to the next. So I mean, maybe you're right that there was something else there. I mean, he certainly could have used him. We're going to go over our projected starting lineups in a little bit, and when you think about where he played in that last camp, as one of the number 10s underneath the striker, like we're certainly short of those players on this roster. So they
Very
could have
much
used
so.
him. They could have used him. Yeah. I mean, I think it's worth mentioning all the other guys. That's the other, I think, key thing from the roster is how many other notable absences there are. No Christian Pulisic, no Wes McKennie, no Tim Weah, Tillman, Chris Richards, Anthony Robinson, just to name a few. I mean, there's more, but like some of the biggest name
Yeah.
players are missing, and it's just amazing to me how much turnover we've had from the roster just 1 month ago, not due to like performance, but what seems to be due to like injuries, and whatnot.
Yeah, and even that's just an interesting discussion because I think like a lot of times we've been talking about like, what our best case US men's national team 11 is. And it's just been pretty clear over these rosters and some of the absences that have cropped up. There's a very strong possibility that we get to the World Cup and that first 11 that you would want just isn't there. Like even with you mentioning all those names, the guy who captained the USMNT at the last World Cup also isn't here in Tyler Adams. And considering how many camps he's missed, like we do have to talk about a possibility of Tyler Adams not being fit for the World Cup. Even Christian Roldan, like in his availability yesterday, kind of mentioned that without Tyler Adams, like they don't really have a six and that they need to learn how to play with two eights. And that's a pretty big tactical shift for this team, especially since when it comes to facing top teams and having a strong defense against them, especially when not playing in a back three, they haven't been able to do that when Tyler Adams isn't on the field.
Yeah. Yeah. So he was initially named to the roster, was a last minute scratch due to, I mean, again, they didn't really say why, but we presume it's because of an injury issue. Over the weekend, he had a pretty bad head-to-head collision when Bournemouth played over the weekend. So he was out. Sean Zawadski also a last-minute scratch, and they brought Timothy Tillman in for a replacement. Let's keep talking about players. We've talked about some of the players, some of the interesting, like from like a roster position, like who's in, who's out. But from the players that are on this roster, when you watch these two games against Paraguay and Uruguay, who's one of the players you're really interested to watch this window or you're going to be keeping a close eye on?
I kind of have two, and they're both in defense because number one is Mark McKenzie, just because we are still waiting to see who steps up to do anything outside of Tim Ream and Chris Richards at center back. And like if McKenzie isn't comfortable playing in his former home in Chester, like he's never going to be comfortable playing for the national team. And it's probably time to figure out what you're going to do there. The other is a name that we've already talked about a little bit in Joe Scally, is because even when Pochettino first rolled out the back three, it's kind of like you quite literally have a right back who has played both right back and at center back, both in a back three, and he's not here. So now seeing how he envisions using Scally in this roster, especially as one of those players who like this is his chance to make an impression, is going to be very interesting to see.
Yeah, Scally's definitely a player I have my eye on because You hear that there was some type of, I don't know how all these rumors are true or not, but supposedly there was some type of incident at one of the camps with him doing donuts in a golf cart, or something like that, that potentially rubbed Poch the wrong way. That hasn't been confirmed, so I don't want to, I don't even know if I've read a credible report on it, but there was some type of issue where he was being called into camp pretty regularly, and then after the March Nations League, he stopped being called in, and it was just basically due to footballing reasons, according to Pochettino. So,
Yeah, and I was gonna say, and Pochettino has always said that like the door is open for players. So like even if something did happen in the past, like at this point, it really doesn't matter because he's here and needs to show why he should still stay here.
yeah, yeah, he's gonna get his. I mean, he's gonna get this. He's gonna get this shot. I would love to see him play one of those third center back. I would love to see him get a start as the right-sided center back in a three, back line, just to see what he can do there. And it'll be interesting to see, if he does get that. The other guy I had at the top of my list was Fuller and Balogun, just because he's had such an incredible last couple of camps, in my opinion, that he's been so fun to watch. He's been so fun to watch on the field. I feel like he's been the best attacking player on the field. He's doing everything out there with his hold-up play, with his link-up play. He's just working his tail off out there. I mean, he has just been entertaining to watch, and I'm just excited to see, can he keep it up in another camp?
Oh yeah, I mean he's showing why you were excited when he committed to the U.S. men's national team. Why the discussion is really not about who the starting nine is going to be. It's who's the number two behind him. Like there just is a different level to the U.S. men's national team attack when he's on the field. And he's really going to need to bring that just because of the fact that he's not going to have Tim Weah and Christian Pulisic next to him.
Yeah. Yeah, well, let's talk about who might be next to him. Let's go into these projected starting lineups, and I'm actually going to share mine with you, Chuck, and those watching on YouTube will be able to see as well. I'll talk you through what I have here. I went with there's some. First of all, you got to decide these projected starting lineups are getting a little bit more difficult because you got to figure out what formation Pochettino is going to roll out there. But I did go with the back three, and so I have Matt Freese in goal. I have a back three of Tim Ream, Miles Robinson, Mark McKenzie. I have Tim Ream on the left, Miles Robinson in the middle, Mark McKenzie on the right. That could be totally wrong. He's going to switch him up. Without Chris Richards being there, I'm not exactly sure how he would put those three out there, but that's how I have it for now. I have Christian Roldan and Tanner Tessman as my two holding midfielders. I have Max Arfsten and Serginho Dest as my wing backs. Arfsten on the left, Dest on the right. As my two forwards underneath the striker, I have Diego Luna and Brennan Aronson, and then I have Fuller and Balogun, up top. And so where I struggled the most with this was, first of all, the center, like how he's going to line up that back three, who he's going to put in there in what order. Then I really struggled under which two players he's going to put underneath Fuller and Balogun. Diego Luna's MLS season has been over for quite some time, so I don't know if he's going to just throw him out there in a starting spot. And then Brennan Aronson, I don't know, I feel actually pretty good Brennan Aronson will be one of them. But what do you think about this projected starting lineup, and how does it differ from yours?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're pretty close. I do believe that at least, so I guess starting from back to front, Matt Freese is the number one. I just don't think there's really much of a discussion there, especially since Matt Turner is another absentee from this roster, and basically no other goalkeeper has gotten a cap under Pochettino since he installed Matt Freese as the number one.
Right.
I do wonder if Pochettino, because he does value a lot about the personal aspect of the game, like that Austin Trusty starts this game as well with all of the former Union products actually being in the starting 11 facing Paraguay, especially since like kind of all of them outside of Freeze are trying to earn their way into the World Cup squad. And this first game is the more experimental game of the two. So I would probably go.
And it's in Philadelphia, so that's why you're saying that.
Yeah, so I would go Trusty on the left or central. I don't think it makes a huge difference. And then Ream in whichever positions that those he doesn't fill, with then Mark McKenzie still on the right. Roldan and Tessman, I think that is probably your double pivot right now, just because, the steps forward that Tessman's taken at Lyon are just really something else. And also not only with how Pochettino has talked about Roldan, but Roldan's actual performances, like every day, the likelihood is rising that he actually starts in the double pivot when the World Cup starts.
I agree 100%.
Yeah, Max Arfson definitely makes sense when it comes to like the left side. The right, I almost feel like is a toss up, just because of like the performances that Dest has had while starting, especially compared to any time that Alex Freeman's been on the field. But probably just because of how many changes you make elsewhere, Dest does start this game. And then, yeah, the front three, I don't see Gio Reyna starting this game. So that's probably what you've got with Luna and Aronson behind Balogun, I think. And the only one that really is a question is, does he roll out Gio Reyna instead of Luna?
Okay. I also wonder about Sebastian Berhalter, if he'll find a way to stick him in somewhere. And do you remember in the Gold Cup when he was playing Berhalter like almost as a right, I don't want to call him a right, like a right winger, but he was playing in that kind of, it was like this forward right side midfield position.
Yeah, both with him and Jack McGlynn, Pochettino has done some strange things.
and then you look at like a lot of pundits and people in the media, we're surprised at how he's playing Weston McKennie in one of those number 10s versus, further back as one of the holding midfielders. And so Poch, he thinks a little bit differently about these, where to put these forwards. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if he stuck somebody like a Sebastian Berhalter in one of those spots, like where Diego Luna or Brennan Aronson is.
It's just like if he's gonna do that, I would rather he just push Tanner Tessman up.
Yeah. I'm not saying I agree with it, but it's just he always has some little wrinkle that just completely blows me away. And with so many changes versus the last camp, I'm trying to think of what he could do to surprise me. The other one that you mentioned, finding a way to put Alex Freeman in there. He likes Alex Freeman. Alex Freeman's played well for the USMNT when he's got the opportunity. So does he find this, does he start him over Dest? Does he maybe play him as a third, like a right-sided center back, or kind of like he played Miles Robinson in the last camp where, he was kind of in that hybrid right side center back, right back kind of role.
And and technically, even when you get to that, like, secondary 10, you could also put Haji right there too.
I thought about Haji Wright as well as one of my like where Diego Luna is right now on the left-hand side there.
Yeah. I just think you're already losing so much in possession right now that it's going to be a very strange game if Haji Wright starts that with this current makeup.
Yeah, well, I agree. All right, well, it'll be interesting to see what he does. I certainly think we have the team, we have the player, we have the personnel to go out there and compete. with both Paraguay and Uruguay. I'm not concerned about that. It's a little bit more difficult to predict how he's going to line everybody up because there's just been so many changes, since the last
Yeah.
camp.
And the good thing is Pochettino has done enough recently to dispel the doom and gloom around the USMNT. Because if we had this roster facing these two teams even 3 months ago, the feeling would have been very different on how they're going to perform. But just the shift into the back three and like kind of giving them more room for error has gone a long way, where you're finally seeing Pochettino's tactical stamp on this team. And it's like, well, now that they kind of have the system down, it is easier, even if he's making changes that we wouldn't necessarily make or don't understand. It's at least easier to see why he's making them.
Yeah. And to your point, I've seen more consistency. They've been like the last couple windows, no matter who he throws out there, we haven't seen a drop off in performance or anybody look confused or out of place. It's been just very consistent, the performances you've been seeing. Let's talk about the two opponents. We got Paraguay up first and then Uruguay. What do you think is important for folks to know about these two opponents and these two matchups?
Oh, I think one of the big things is just always, because I feel like especially it's very easy to overlook the first friendly with Paraguay, but they're just like most of the South American teams, a better team than they actually get credit for being. Because even they still played Japan and South Korea tough in the same window that the USMNT was playing them, and were able to qualify directly for the World Cup. Like I don't know exactly what to expect from them lineup wise. Just because I definitely am more familiar with Uruguay's team than Paraguay's, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be an easy match.
No. To your point, if you look at, they just finished CONMEBOL World Cup qualifying, and if you look at the standings, you had Argentina kind of way up here in first place with 38 points. But then the next five teams, the next five teams were either at 28 or 29 points. So there was like nothing, Ecuador had 29, Colombia 28, Uruguay 28, Brazil 28, Paraguay 28. So there was like, when you look at an 18-match World Cup qualifying standings, there was really nothing separating Paraguay from Uruguay or Colombia other than goal differential. So to your point, this is a really good team, and I think in our minds we think of Uruguay as like the better team because they're just maybe more known, but Paraguay's certainly been, or they certainly did play just as well as them, in World Cup qualifying.
Yeah, no, definitely. Because it's like, yeah, one team might have the actual names that you recognize, but it doesn't mean that the other one's going to be a pushover. Which is why, like, it is good to see that the USMNT are scheduling friendlies that actually will test them and prepare them for the World Cup.
Yeah. Well, let me share just a few more stats about the teams. I always just like to review what the rankings are relative to each other. I'll start with the ELO ratings. The ELO ratings has Uruguay 12, Paraguay 21, and then the U.S. way down at 41. So according to ELO rankings, we should lose both these games. But then you go to the FIFA rankings. FIFA has Uruguay 15, U.S. 16 right behind them, and then Paraguay 39. I don't know. Even though we just talked about how they're both, really tough opponents, I do tend to find myself getting more excited about the Uruguay match because there's something about Uruguay that I always think of them as like the penultimate, or just like the perfect test for the U.S. in terms of like the type of team they need to be able to beat to make it to the next level. because Uruguay is not one of the elite teams, like France, Argentina, somebody like Spain, somebody like that. But that next tier of teams, they're right there. Like you're not going to go into any knockout tournament and beat Uruguay unless you're a really good team.
Oh yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, and and those are the types of teams that the U.S. hasn't proven they can get past, in a knockout round type of tournament.
Yeah, it's gonna be huge because it like especially like back to talking about Tyler Adams, teams like Uruguay without him, the US doesn't compete well against. And so like this is kind of the window where you're going to be able to truly tell if anything's changed because being competitive in these games without being at your best, especially when like even for Paraguay, like Diego Gomez and Julio Enciso are like actually in really good form for their clubs right now and gonna offer a huge challenge for the defense. And then Uruguay, you just can't score against. You have to play through their press. Like they're gonna give you everything you can handle every time they step out on the pitch. So like winning or even just like drawing, like and being competitive in all these matches will tell you a lot about this team.
Yeah. And of course, I think we all remember the last time the U.S. played Uruguay. It was in the Copa America. Greg Berhalter's last match in charge of the United States is when that's what officially grouped the U.S. in the Copa America and set everything in motion for bringing Mauricio Pochettino back, or bringing Mauricio Pochettino into the U.S. to coach the team. Okay, final thing I want to talk about here is big picture. I wanted what is a good window? What will a good window look like to you? What does success look like to you for the U.S. in this window?
I think you need to win one of the games. Because even if somehow you lose to Paraguay and then beat Uruguay, it still is a relatively successful window. And it's always strange because especially at this time, you're really just looking for growth from the team. So how does the double pivot look? Are they able to actually keep control and possession? Has anyone decided that they want to step up and take the reins at center back? Does Diego Luna finally take that next step, or does Giorena start and actually surprise us because he hasn't played much at all? It's kind of about those little things, and obviously it still all goes out the window if you get embarrassed in one of those games, but it really is about that more than it's about true wins and losses right now.
Yeah. There are a lot of players who are kind of fighting for their roster spot lives here, and it'll be interesting to see how they perform. But I gotta tell you, Chuck, I do care about the wins and losses at this point. And when I'm going to say the most important thing for me, you know what it is?
Well,
we have a three match unbeaten streak right now. You know what? I know that's nothing to get too excited about. I want to keep that 3-match unbeaten streak going. That's what I want to see.
Tell that to Pochettino and see what his response is, because he has said time and time again how much he does not care about the wins and losses. And while I'm sure that's not completely true, there is a grain of truth to it. Doesn't really matter what this team does right now, as long as they show up and win once the World Cup starts. And kind of the only way that they're going to do that is if you see some players take steps forward now, even if they don't result in wins. Because even from that lineup that you put up on the screen, 6 players from that start in a perfect world at the World Cup?
Yeah, maybe less. I'm looking at it now. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. But man, and I know Pochettino says that consistently,
It's
but
just, yeah.
I feel like I want to see, I just feel like they need to develop this winning mentality, this winning momentum, ahead of the World Cup.
Oh, definitely.
And
And
that's what I'm talking about. Like these, an unbeaten streak, it means something.
yeah,
It develops a mindset, and that's what I want to see.
and it's one of those interesting things that can make judging parts of international soccer tough because like you always do want to win, but with like so much being just scenarios where you have to like kind of create your own stakes, it is sometimes hard to judge like, okay, what does this loss necessarily mean? And especially if like they lose the unbeaten streak, but then still beat Uruguay.
Yeah. If they beat Uruguay, I'm going to be a happy man. I'm going to be a happy man, unless Uruguay like rotates all his players or something like that. But no, I'll be happy nonetheless because they're a good team. They have depth, and I'd be super pumped to have that win. All right, Chuck, are you still sending people to your Blue Sky account as the primary way to kind of follow you?
Yeah.
All right, and I have that as Chuck. Yeah. A yeah with two A's though at the end. Is
Yeah.
that right?
Yeah, that is correct. It was a campaign slogan running for like Senate during college that stuck as social media handles.
Ah, okay. Cool. Now I know. Now I know. All right. Well, I will make sure and put a link to your Blue Sky account in the show notes as well as your work at CBS Sports. Thanks so much for joining the show today and enjoy the match because you're going to be there for this match against Paraguay and Philadelphia, right?
Yep, I will be there.
All right. Well, I'm curious to hear afterwards what you learned from being there. Thanks to everyone for listening to Here and Abroad. If you enjoyed the episode, please do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube, or that follow button if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or somewhere else. Thank you so much. I'm Frank Garza. You can follow me on X at Frank Garza 007, and I'll be back next week with a new episode.